Let us, as we begin this hearing, let us be very, very clear. A federal budget is more than just a huge spreadsheet of numbers. Federal budget speaks to who we are as a nation and where we want to be in the future. It speaks to whether or not we can go beyond the needs of the lobbyists, whether we can go beyond the needs and the power of wealthy campaign contributors who have so much influence over what goes on here in Capitol Hill, or whether we can finally address the needs of the tens of millions of working families, middle-income people, low-income people who are struggling every single day to take care of their families. That is really what this whole debate is about. Which side are we on? So let me just take a moment to describe what I believe to be some of the major crises in our country today and how the president's budget responds to these crises. Today in our country, the very, very wealthiest people are becoming phenomenally wealthier, while at the same time, over half of the people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. I know that is not a reality we talk about terribly much, but in fact, that is the simple truth. Millions of American workers are trying to get by on $8 an hour, $9 an hour, $12 an hour, all of which, to my mind, are starvation wages. Nobody, no matter what state you are living in, can get by on those wages. In a State of the Union speech, President Biden called on Congress to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. That is a step forward. We should go further. The federal minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25 an hour for 13 years. 13 years. And if the minimum wage had increased at the rate of productivity since 1968, it would not be $7.25 an hour, it would be $23 an hour. The time is now for Congress to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Today in America, we have more income and wealth inequality than we have had in 100 years. I understand we don't talk about it. I understand the corporate media doesn't talk about it, but that is the reality. Today in our country, the two wealthiest people now own more wealth than the bottom 42% of our population, 130 million Americans. Two people, 130 million Americans. Anybody think that that is what America is supposed to be about? I don't think so. During this terrible pandemic, which within a few weeks will claim 1 million American lives, when thousands of essential workers died doing their jobs, over 700 billionaires in America became nearly $2 trillion richer. And let me say this. While we hear a whole lot of talk lately in terms of the horrific war in Ukraine, about the need to take on the oligarchs in Russia, something which I very strongly support. Anyone who thinks we do not have an oligarchy right here in America is sorely mistaken. Today in America, multi-billionaires like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson are off taking joyrides on their rocket ships to outer space. They're buying $500 million super yachts. And we talk about the yachts that Putin's friends have. Well, guess what? They have them too here in this country, living in mansions with 25 bathrooms. In his budget, the president has proposed a 20% minimum tax on those who are worth at least $100 million. This is an important step forward, and I congratulate the president for doing that. We should go further, though. In 2020, I introduced a 60% tax on the obscene wealth gains billionaires made during the pandemic, legislation I will soon be reintroducing, and which is precisely what the American people want. They understand You don't have to be an economist to understand this. They understand there is something fundamentally wrong when so few have so much and so many Americans have so little. Now, I understand that some of my colleagues get very nervous when we talk about wealth distribution. Oh, my goodness, can't talk about that. But here is the reality, and that is that over the last 45 years in this country, there has been a massive, massive redistribution of wealth. The problem is it has gone in precisely the wrong direction. According to the Rand Institute, not a particularly progressive organization, since 1975, 50 trillion, that's a T, $50 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the bottom 90% to the top 1%, primarily because corporate profits and CEO compensation has grown much faster than the wages of ordinary workers. But it is not just income and wealth inequality that we must address. It is economic and political power, as we discussed in a hearing in this committee last month. Three Wall Street firms control over $21 trillion in assets, which is basically the GDP of the United States of America, the largest economy on earth. 3 companies control hundreds and hundreds of companies. 3 Wall Street firms. That's not a problem. I don't know what a problem is. In terms of health care, over 70 million Americans today are either uninsured or underinsured. 60,000 people die each and every year because they can't get to a doctor on time because they don't have insurance, don't have the money for co-payments or deductibles. We remain, my friends, the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right, and yet we pay the highest prices in the world for health care. In his budget, the president has proposed a substantial increase in investments in mental health, enormously important. Pandemic preparedness, my God, I hope we can pass that. We have to pass that. The Indian Health Service, and research into finding a cure for cancer and other life-threatening diseases. All of those ideas are enormously important. We have got to pass them, but we have got to go further than that. An overwhelming number of Americans, vast majority of the population, want us to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and eyeglasses. In the richest country on earth, senior citizens should not have teeth rotting in their mouths. Further, as a nation, we should understand what every other major country does. Healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. The function of a rational healthcare system is to provide healthcare to all in a cost-effective way, not to allow private insurance companies and private drug companies to make obscene levels of profit. And I'm happy to inform members of this committee that in early May, we will be having a hearing right here in this committee on the need to pass a Medicare for All single-payer program. According to the Congressional Budget Office, Medicare for All, this is the CBO, Medicare for All would save the American people and our entire healthcare system $650 billion each and every year. So I say to all my conservative friends worried about the expenditure of taxpayer money, work with us, pass a Medicare for All single-payer program. But health care reform must not only address the private health insurance companies, but the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. Year after year, decade after decade, we're talking about the outrageous cost of prescription drugs in this country, the huge profits of the drug companies. President has proposed, and I agree, that Medicare must negotiate prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry, which is exactly what the Veterans Administration has done for 30 years. If Medicare does that, we lower the cost of prescription drugs by 50%. Not bad. Do we have the courage to take on the hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbyists who are all over Capitol Hill telling us that we got to protect the profits of the industry, or do we stand with the patients and the ordinary Americans who are sick and tired of paying these outrageous prices? And then there is the existential threat of climate change. Well, I don't know what to say about that. Scientists tell us we have a handful of years to transform our energy system, but we're not going to have much of a planet to leave our children and grandchildren. And I hope that we very much have the capability of taking on the greed of the fossil fuel industry and saving this planet for future generations. Now, I understand that my Republican colleagues want to blame inflation on President Biden and the enormously successful American Rescue Plan, but let us be clear. The problem is not that a low-income worker got a 50-cent raise last week and a $1,400 check from the federal government over a year ago. That is not the problem. To a significant degree, pathetically, large corporations are using the war in Ukraine and the pandemic as an excuse to raise prices significantly to make record-breaking profits. This is taking place at the gas pump, at the grocery store, and virtually every other sector of the economy. That is why, in my view, we need a windfall profits tax, and why this committee will be holding a hearing on Tuesday of next week to deal with the unprecedented level of corporate greed that is taking place in America today. I think we can all agree that we are living through an extremely difficult moment in American history. The question before us is whether we will stand with the working families of this country and protect their interest, or whether we stand with the big money interests, the large multinational corporations, and the wealthy campaign contributors who decade after decade have enormous influence over both political parties. Now the President has done his job and submitted his budget to us. It is up to Congress to review it, pass the proposals that make sense, and improve upon them. As chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, I will be doing everything I can to pass a strong and robust budget reconciliation bill that works for working families, not the 1%. With that, let me now recognize the ranking member